Hey everyone, welcome back to CISSP Daily Dose by Colonel Shubhajit Nahar, retired. Okay, so we have seen a lot of content till now, and I try to produce at least one daily dose per week. Uh, it got delayed slightly, and today we will be going ahead with risk management. Now, why is risk management important in information security? I'll be very, very clear. It's because there's so many of them. And if you don't manage so many risks, then you will not have any understanding as to which risks will materialize into your environment and which risks may not. There are few smaller concepts which you should know about risk management, and that is what I am intending to cover in today's session. Right. So, firstly, what is risk? Risk is it is a probability of something negative. Okay, probability that something negative might happen to your asset, right? Now that is, if this probability increases, your risk increases. If this probability decreases, the risk to the asset decreases, right? So that is as simple as a definition when you want to understand risks. Now let's take a small example and try to understand risks terminologies. Okay, so you live in a house, right? I don't know about which part of the world you live. I live in India, right? And you have a small perimeter fence, right? Why have you put a fence? Because you don't want any unwanted animals or stray animals to come into it. You don't want thieves to just easily access your house. So which is the asset? Your house is the asset, right? Okay. And what is it that threatens your house? Okay, so you have thieves, okay, which can carry out theft, right? You have earthquake as a risk. You might, if there is some earthquake and there's a chances that this house, if it is not uh, earthquake resistant, might just crumble. Okay, you have floods. Okay, that's also a risk. What else could be a risk to your you know uh, property or whatever assets you have inside that house? What all could be more possible risks, right? Neighbors, are your neighbors some kind of risk? You don't know. Okay, it depends on what kind of relationship you have with your neighbors. What else? Okay, is tsunami a threat to your? Okay, if you live near a seashore, uh, then yes. But I live in Delhi, and Delhi is way, way, way away from seashore. And the only way Delhi will get flooded or have a tsunami is if a meteor come and strikes Indian Ocean or Arabian Ocean. Okay, that is the only case wherein a large tsunami will come and it will be the end of the world. So now I have identified threats to the assets where I live. What are these? There could be theft. There could be some kind of a natural disaster. There could be floods. There is a river nearby, right? Uh, Neighbors could be threats. They could, be some kind of threat. What kind of threat? I don't want to debate that. Let's leave our neighbors away from it. And I've identified tsunami as a threat to the asset where I live, right? So that's why for identified risk, you need to carry out threat analysis. That's one of the most important part. And please go back to my previous session on threat modeling as to how to analyze threats to an information asset, right? So the first part of analyzing risk is to identify your asset, what you are trying to protect. That is the first step. Because unless you don't know what you want to protect, what will you protect, right? So first step is always identifying assets. Next step is identifying the threats to those assets, right? So next step is to identify those threats. So if you are able to identify the asset and identify the threat, now you match them, you will come to know whether those threats are actually threats to you or not. Okay. Now that matching is called the vulnerability analysis. Now let's analyze vulnerability. Okay. In this particular case, now we will mark it with red. Can thieves come? Yes, they come to the boundary wall and they find a small gap in my perimeter. Okay. They would love to exploit that and reach my house. So vulnerability exists. Okay. Earthquake. Is there a vulnerability of earthquake for my house? Right. I go into my historical data and I see that Delhi has been facing earthquakes for millions of years, but looking at the historical data, there has not been a major earthquake in our last 100 years. However, there have been some significant earthquakes around 1200 years back. Now, that gives me a data that, yes, there are chances of earthquake. So earthquake might be a threat, and there, whether my house is ready to take that earthquake, if earthquake happens, whether my house will be able to bear that. That would be my vulnerability analysis. So I carried out a vulnerability analysis and I found that my house can withstand a earthquake of 7.5 Richter scale. Okay. Then I did an analysis of flood. Flood is a threat. There is a river nearby. And then I again saw historical data and I saw that there is a river going, but the government has made a very big, barricade or a bund so that in case there is a water level rise, our area does not go into a flood. Okay. And the chances of that flood happening is almost once in 100 years, right? That is the risk. That is the risk. That is the occurrence probability. Okay, once in 100 years. Do I need to protect? Do I need to put in something about it? Do I need to do something about it? Probably I may not be able to, but what I will do is I will place my critical components, okay, which should not be submerged by local floods. Okay, Delhi is known to have local floods. So I will carry out an assessment and I'll create my house at a certain height, and that height is around, say, 4 feet above the main sea level or 4 feet above the ground. Neighbors, I can't do anything. I just have to maintain some good relationship with them, right? Is a tsunami threat, can the tsunami threat materialize? Yes, it can, but it would be a stellar event. And if that happens, we all are done. What do I do about it? I can't do anything about it, right? So if you see, we just carried out a risk analysis of how to protect a particular asset, right? Now, in this case, the threats were listed and the vulnerabilities needs to be analyzed. So you need to carry out vulnerability analysis based on the threat which you are considering, whether vulnerability corresponding to the threat exists in your environment or not. So that is called the risk analysis. So step 1 is you identify the asset. Step 2 is identify threats. Step 3 is identify vulnerabilities, right? And then finally, what you get is the risk analysis, wherein you say that risk is equal to threat into vulnerability, right? That is the mathematical formula of risk. And there are ways in which you carry out risk analysis. Now, once you carry out this risk analysis in a quantitative manner, that is, you can quantify the threat in numbers and you can quantify the threat vulnerability in numbers, and you can give some probability figure, then it's called quantitative risk analysis. There's some quantity associated with it. You carry out a qualitative analysis wherein you say, what are the chances of tsunami hitting my house? I don't live near the sea. Okay. The chances are, very, very low. So I gave it a qualitative treatment. Okay. So generally, you carry out risk analysis to find out whether your asset deserves a quantitative treatment or qualitative treatment, or a treatment of both qualitative and quantitative, which will lead to something called hybrid risk assessment. Right? So this is all for the day, and we always, as usual, we end the day with a small question, and this is the question I have for you. Now, today we have something called a double negative question. What is a double negative question? A double negative question is asking something in negative and then negating it using another negative statement. How? So if you see in this question, I have used double negative at least 3 times. In the context of information security risk management, how can organizations not fail, okay, to prevent the non-occurrence? So 2 double negative, make it a positive. Negative into negative is positive. You say not fail to prevent the non-occurrence of undetected vulnerabilities. Okay, again negative statement. Given the absence, again negative statement. So 2 double negative statements is actually asking 2 positive statements, right? So if you can read the question in this form also. In the context of information security risk management, how can organization fail to prevent the occurrence of detected vulnerabilities given the presence of sufficient countermeasures? So what is it that you're supposed to do? So that means it is asking you how to find out something which is going to happen in your environment, because there are 2 double negative statements and they have cancelled each other. Okay, so since not fail and non-occurrence leads to positive, and undetected and absence of insufficient makes this again a positive statement. So that means it is basically asking you, organization, how do organizations fail to prevent occurrence of detected vulnerabilities given there is sufficient countermeasure? That means you had a gate, you had a house, and still you failed. And why do you fail? Because probably you didn't do a proper risk assessment. So let's see. By relying solely on historical data and neglecting proactive risk assessment. Well, if you rely only on historical data, then your assessment may not be correct, right? By outsourcing all security, you never outsource all security responsibilities. Implementing countermeasures with inadequate security controls and hoping for the best. You never hope for the best. It has to be a cumulative effort. By ignoring the possibility of undetected vulnerabilities altogether and focusing on known threats. Oh, definitely, you will never do something like that. Okay. By meticulously identifying and addressing potential vulnerabilities through rigorous security assessment. Now, this looks as a possible solution. You will have to carry out a rigorous security assessments, and I think this is the right answer. Okay, so that's all for CISSP daily dose. Do check us check my courses out on learn.protect.io. If you like this video, please hit on like button and subscribe to my channel. Take care and see you next time.